Welcome to the 5th episode of photographs from our Western Queensland trip. I have put together an account of where we have been, what we have visited and what the country was like for our family and friends to keep them updated on our travels. There were two options to return to Queensland: the Cordello Downs Road through South Australia or the Arrowbury Road along the Queensland-South Australian border. As always, we researched the options and asked for advice from other travellers about the best route and road conditions. However, the information was conflicting. But I think it sometimes depends on travellers' experience, caravan or tow vehicle. So taking into account what we had learnt and that we were travelling later in the tourist season, the Arrowbury Road sounded the better option, and it would give us a chance of visiting Haddon Corner, one of our bucket list locations. We had left Innaminka after an early breakfast just as the sun was rising and made our way back along Adventure Way. The scenery was breathtaking this early in the morning, the sun highlighting the extraction sites as well as the cattle far off in the distance and along the roadside. The Channel Country was certainly having a good season. We were following a fuel truck for quite some distance and were happy just to follow along. What a great choice it was, as it gave us the heads up on a few nasty crossings that the truck had trouble stopping for. Sometimes it pays to enjoy the scenery at a more leisurely pace. We were again passing the Innaminka homestead and crossing Cooper Creek. It astounds me where the homestead is built, with its double frontage to Cooper Creek, and I am told being able to look out over Innaminka Waterhole, not to mention the vast expanse of flood-out country and ranges, a 360-degree view. I suppose there has to be some drawbacks of living in such an isolated area: isolation, dust, flies, heat, not to mention the cold, dry weather, floods, but what a spot to live. Cooper Creek, with its single-lane bridge, I wonder how often it has had to be replaced after flooding. On the other hand, there was such an amazing stretch of water on both sides of the bridge. The bird life this early in the morning was not as prolific as when we had crossed a few days prior in the middle of the day. At the Innaminka Arrowbury turnoff, we were leaving the blacktop, so stopped and checked over the boat and gidget, and put the caravan on to reduce the dust in the van. Not that we have ever had any issues with dust so far, touch wood. While stopped, we saw a grader busy working on the Digtree Innaminka Homestead Access Road. The first 30 kilometres or so of the road was very rocky, involving straight stretches, hill climbs and washed out gullies, but through some of the most spectacular landscape we had been through. It was truly incredible. The Arrowbury Road vaguely follows the South Australian and Queensland border from the Digtree turnoff for about 250 kilometres of remote driving. We had come prepared with extra fuel, and Rick had checked both Gidget and the boat over thoroughly before leaving Innaminka. The colours were stunning. The contrast between the rocky outcrops and the magnificent mountain range. If only I could capture it as I was seeing it. It was incredible. Though I am pleased with the photographs that I have taken, there is no way in the world I have captured the landscape's true beauty. This area of Queensland is absolutely stunning. The vastness, the wide open spaces, the geology and natural formations of hills, creeks and waterways is astonishing. It really is something to see. Even knowing the flip side of droughts, tough times, heat, cold, wind and flies, isolation and lots of other facets of rural living, it was such an amazing place. Knowing this area of Queensland was once an inland sea millions of years ago, it felt like we were travelling through ancient valleys surrounded by flat-topped mesas. The open Gibber plains that were covered in feed stretched for kilometres. The road varied from rough gravel, rocky, to corrugated with rough creek crossings. We took it slowly and drove to the conditions, which gave me time to take more photographs, though taking more photographs may not have been a good idea. The Cooper Basin is approximately 249,000 square kilometres in area and was once an ancient valley surrounded by flat-topped mesas that hinted at where the original tableland had been millions of years ago. The basin contains sedimentary rocks spanning the late Carboniferous to the late Jurassic period and is overlain in parts by the geologically younger Innaminka and Lake Eyre basins, and for the most part is mostly desert. Oil and gas located 1,250 metres below the surface was originally discovered in 1960. To date, there are over 1,800 petroleum wells drilled in the basin. The oil and gas deposits in the Cooper Basin tend to be fairly small and disjointed, but highly economical, given the relatively low cost of drilling and competition. The largest producer in the basin is Santos Limited. As well, there are many smaller listed companies exploring for additional deposits in the region. I found it interesting that the Cooper Basin had been selected for a proposed site for a geothermal project using superheated water from 5 kilometres below the Earth's surface and use it to generate small amounts of electricity, as these rocks are the hottest in the world at economic drilling depths and away from volcanoes. While most of the world's electricity is produced in power stations using steam turbines traditionally generated by the burning fossil fuels, exploration in the Cooper Basin, where test wells were drilled, temperatures measured around 240 degrees Celsius. Geothermal power was considered an option, but unfortunately the cost of implementing the technology was uneconomical for the project to continue. Before us were ochre-coloured hills, which eventually gave way to spectacular rich red tablelands that stretched in all directions. The scenery was forever changing from gibber country, mixed with stretches of small flat floodplains, and sandy country, while in the distance tree-lined watercourses stood out against the gibber landscape. It was truly amazing. We were on the very edge of the eastern section of Sturt's Stony Desert, a seemingly never-ending landscape of gibbers that covered the countryside. It is said that Charles Sturt decided to walk back through it because he was fascinated by the landscape. Some say it defies belief, but I truly could see what he was thinking. It really is an isolated and remote area of southwestern Queensland, but truly spectacular. The road then became very sandy, and we were travelling between sand ridges. The rich red sand contrasted with the spinifex with its yellowish flower stalks. We had travelled over corrugated sections, and the road narrowed, so Rick decided to stop for a rest break, stretch our legs and add the extra fuel we were carrying. Lo and behold, a vehicle appeared before us, with 4 others following, and a car and a caravan. They were the only vehicles we had seen so far on this leg of the trip. I am not sure who was more surprised, them or us. For most of the morning we had been travelling through Arrowbury Station, a long, narrow property with the western boundary the state border between Queensland and South Australia, predominantly a cattle breeding and fattening enterprise. We passed the outstation Planet Downs and then another outstation Nulla, and knew we were heading towards Tanbar, as Lake Yamayama was to the east. Lake Yamayama is also known as Lake McKillop, is an ephemeral lake on the Cooper Creek system in the arid Channel Country and is the largest inland ephemeral lake in Queensland. Lake Yamayama only holds water following major floods on Cooper Creek, and when filled, the lake covers an area of 72,000 hectares. However, it rarely fills, maybe about every 25 to 30 years. When dry, the lake bed's cracking grey clay soils support extensive grasslands dominated by rat's tail couch. Several short-term herbaceous flowering plants that are not grasses, sedges or rushes grow among the couch following rain or minor flooding. The northeastern section of the lake supports open lignum shrubland with patches of open woodland dominated by coolabah and shoestring acacia. Red sand gave way to rough rocky ground, and then we were crossing into the Barcoo Shire, leaving the Bulu Shire behind. We appeared to be travelling along the top of the world, but we were on the tableland country with the landscape stretching out in all directions. From here on the changes were more subtle. Lots of gibber country mixed with stretches of small floodplains and sand country. The landscape appeared flat. In truth, it was spanned with watercourses flanked by the line of trees that grew along the edges. Arriving at the Cordello Downs Windora turnoff, the road became a wide gravel highway. Cattle were crossing the road heading for water that was on our left. It always surprises me when I see cattle in good condition when so little feed seems to grow across the landscape, and I marvelled at the cattle, fat and shiny. The Bulu Shire, with Cameron Corner at the most southern part, covers an area of 73,724 square kilometres, with the administrative centre in Thargomindah. Major industries in the Bulu Shire include wool, beef, opals, oil and natural gas. Towns and localities in the area include the towns of Thargomindah, Hungerford and Nakundra, with the localities of Bulu Downs, Cameron Corner, Durham, Buliwarra, Danambor, Nokatunga and Norley. In 2021, the population of the Shire was 337 people. The Barcoo Shire, with a population of around 270, is said to be the heart of the Channel Country and is one of the most remote shires in the state, with an area of 61,974 square kilometres. It is the only place where two prominent and significant inland rivers, the Thompson and Barcoo, meet to form a creek, the Cooper Creek. Major industries in the Shire are beef production, some opal mining, and the development of known oil and gas reserves in the region. The settlements of Junda, Ferris Creek, Stonehenge, Windora and Tambar Station are found within the Shire. Tambar Station, around 1 million hectares, can carry around 24,000 head of cattle in a good season. The Cooper Creek flows through Tambar and floods out onto a significant portion of the property each year, as well as feeding into Lake Yamayama, providing a natural irrigation system for pasture production. Like all Channel Country properties, they depend on seasonal conditions that vary from place to place and year to year, but often the land is dry and much of it is desert. Just prior to the turnoff to Haddon Corner on Tambar Station, we passed a grader working on the road, making the surface quite loose and filling in the corrugations and wheel tracks left during the wet. We were about 50 kilometres from the Bursville-Windora Road. The signage for Haddon Corner had been erected for travellers heading south. Thankfully, we were taking our time and were aware that the next signage we were looking for was for Haddon Corner. Not far from the turnoff, Rick and I decided to leave the van beside a narrow watercourse in the shade of some trees, as we had heard that the two sandhills before the corner were difficult to traverse, and as we had only seen the grader and a group of travellers going south, we thought it would be wiser not to take Gidget with us. The road began in good condition and quickly became gibber country and then a vast open floodplain. About 2 kilometres from the corner, we were then confronted with the first of the two sand dunes we had heard about. By now it was the middle of the day and the sand was very soft and loose, so we were thankful we had not brought Gidget. Over the top and onwards we continued to the second dune. The swale between the dunes were dry, but we could see where the water had laid after rain and were thankful that we were travelling in the dry. Haddon Corner is the point where Queensland's southern and the western border with South Australia meet. The name Haddon Corner is derived from Haddon Downs, the pastoral property in the corner on the South Australian side. The property was established in 1877 by pastoralists William and John Howie. Haddon Corner was first surveyed by Augustus Popel in 1880 and lies at the intersection of the 26th parallel south latitude and the 141st meridian. The marker post was in the middle of a dry lake bed between the dunes. We could now tick off another bucket list item. Haddon Corner, the South Australian Queensland site, tick. Cameron Corner, the South Australian, New South Wales and Queensland border corner we had visited on our Outback New South Wales trip, tick. With 3 border corners still to go, I think we will be travelling for quite a while yet. On our return to Gidget, Rick and I decided not to camp where we had parked the van. What with the dry wind, heat, flies and more flies, as well as the dust, we thought we could find a better place to camp further along the journey. So we reattached Gidget and continued back to the Arrowby Road. The road widened and in places was 2 lanes wide, though like all gravel roads it was rough in places with a build-up of gravel between the wheel tracks. It was stunning country we were travelling through. On reaching the Birdsville-Windora Road, I thought the road would be in better condition than the Arrowby Road, being a major road in the area, but I was sadly mistaken. I had enjoyed our travels along the Arrowby Road. It had been well worth the drive. Such an amazing experience. Mesa country in the south, then the vast dirt stony desert. Wow, what an experience. Roads that disappeared into the horizon, gravel, sand, gibbers, corrugations and smoother sections. I look forward to doing it again sometime. We were now entering the Diamantina Shire and our first stop was at Dion's Lookout, a short drive off the Birdsville Developmental Road, with fantastic 360-degree views of the countryside. A monument was erected in memory of Dion Brooke, who at the age of 20 was tragically killed in a helicopter accident. The lookout offers stunning views of the surrounding countryside, including the Diamantina River, the Channel Country and Sturt Stony Desert. We could see for kilometres. Such amazing views, and what a place to remember a young man who died doing a job he loved. Rick and I took some time to also remember others who had been tragically killed or died doing what they loved most in this remote outback area of Queensland. Rick and I were now heading towards Birdsville. We had travelled through the eastern edge of Sturt Stony Desert, named after Charles Sturt in 1844, while he was trying to find the inland sea, which he believed lay at the centre of Australia. The desert's Gibber Plains are formed of closely packed angular or rounded pebbles and cobbles that glistened in the sun, making the Gibber Plains a striking landscape. The Sturt Stony Desert also contained stony tablelands and jump-ups, while sparse acacia shrubland grow around the small drainage lines, while larger ones are fringed with coolabah and red river gum woodlands. These Gibber Downs originated from desert sandstone sheets which once covered the area and have slowly been weathered, leaving the harder fragments remaining. We had again travelled through Gilgai country, consisting of mounds and depressions or small ephemeral lakes that formed from a surface depression and expanding clay soils dotted across the landscape. On leaving Dion's Lookout, we made our way to Betoota, where we stopped for a cold drink, stretched our legs and had a good look around before making camp at Browns Creek Waterhole, where we will leave you for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed watching this episode. Join us next time as we explore Birdsville, challenge ourselves to climb Big Red, and make our way to Bedourie. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now, Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.